home batteries. And just to be clear, this is electrical batteries, so I have two sorts of batteries at home. I have a heat battery and I have electricity batteries. So what and why? Why would you have home batteries? Well, you already have storage at home. You store your clothes, you store your food. You wouldn't want to have none. We have a small house, but storage for all sorts of things you don't want to run out of tomorrow or have to go somewhere expensive for is good. You don't have to buy all your stuff in the corner shop because you've forgotten, so you do a bulk buy. Batteries can be useful because you can buy electricity when it's cheaper if you're on a variable rate, for example. So, and if you've got a water tank, for example, at home, hot water tank, you're already storing heat in there. And you have gadgets with batteries. You wouldn't have to want to walk around with this plugged in all the time. Who remembers having to have your laptop plugged in all the time to do anything? So you can store electricity directly off-grid or from solar PV. So it's possible. I have solar on the roof, and the most obvious reason to get a battery is because, surprisingly enough, you do things when the sun isn't up. So you want to capture the solar off your roof and then use it even when the sun isn't up. But there's plenty. Dan will tell you later about how he's got a huge battery so that he can fill it up during the winter and run his heat pump off it during the day, whether or not the solar is doing anything. I have, this exciting collection at the top, I have a little off-grid system, and these are things a bit like car batteries. And so my website, if you ever go to my website, which you might have one of these things, that's entirely run off a Raspberry Pi off these things. It never touches the grid. And I can charge my laptop and stuff off there. But I also have these AC-coupled batteries, and this is what you would probably be doing if you got batteries attached. This is one brand, Enphase. There are many others, which will absorb energy, for example, from PV and release it when you use it, and they try and stop energy flowing in or out of your house at all, so you don't end up paying for it. But here's a heat battery, so this is during assembly, under my combi as it then was. So I could fill this up with electricity overnight, and our combi doesn't have to run for hot water. It's 3 different sorts of battery, but probably the sort we're thinking of when you're in here is this on the AC coupled battery. So why do we need batteries? Well, there's this little thing called climate change and renewables coming on, and a change of that means is that we can't do what we used to do with electricity, which is turn up the generators when we want more electricity, and in particular, turning it up at peak rate when everyone gets back from school and wants their dinner. This is basically this peak, is people having their dinner in the evening. And so what we need is storage, so that we can fill up when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing and release it later when we want to use it. And so using your own solar, so in California they got to this problem where their demand used to be, they had a second problem like this, the demand curve throughout the day, so this is midnight, coming through to midday, through to midnight again, used to be quite flat, but as more and more solar came on, the demand off the grid goes down lower and lower and lower, and then it has to recover really quickly to make up the evening peak when the sun's gone down, people's aircon is still running, and this little thing called ramp rate is really difficult for the grid to deal with as well. You can't do a 0 to 60 in your coal plant, right? You need to take it gradually. So storage again helps flatten the duck, as it's called. This is sort of duck shape, right? You can see it's a duck. It's called flattening the duck. Will a battery save you money? Well, Dan believes it is saving you money, right? I think on the whole it's pretty marginal, but the grid is definitely will need lots and lots and lots more storage and stuff we can put behind our own meters so that we get charged less is also good. And I think, Alan, also you believe you've saved a reasonable amount from your
with the battery?
Yes.
Yes, because we're using it overnight.
Yes.
So we're in the winter months we charge at reduced rates.
Yeah. And again, so both Dan and Alan have time of day tariffs, so they get charged a different amount by the hour of day, and they both have solar. So I don't have a time of day tariff, but I do have solar. So sometimes, usually batteries with solar is a really good combination. Sometimes just batteries and the time of day tariff also works and may save you money. So just a point that came up earlier, there are 2 things about a battery that matter. One is kilowatts, which is the maximum power it can cover. When you flick on your kettle, that's 3 kilowatts typically. When you turn it in your oven, it's 2 kilowatts. My batteries that I showed there are slightly old now, and there's an older design, so mine can only do just over a kilowatt of power. So if I turn on the kettle and the sun isn't shining, it will still bring 2/3 of the electricity in from the grid. But these days, you don't need to do that, so you should make sure you have a kilowatt rating, which is at least about 3, which will cover an oven or a kettle or something. But the other thing is how much energy you store, and that's your kilowatt hours. And there isn't a perfect simple answer, but generally you should think about carrying about a day's use. So that, for example, if you're on solar, you fill it up during the day off your solar, and it discharges overnight, and then you don't need to import it overnight. Now, if someone said to you, oh yes, let's have a big store of energy, why don't we give you a big can of diesel and put it in your hallway? You would probably think, that's not such a great idea. So a battery actually stores much less energy per size and per weight than diesel by the can, considerably less, but you wouldn't want even a can of diesel sitting in your hallway. So the rules have changed recently to make it clear that you shouldn't put batteries somewhere that might be an escape route, like your hallway or somewhere, preferably not in the house at all. So Alan has a garage. You have a garage. I have a porch, so mine's gone out in the porch. Garage, right. So if you've got a garage, that's the best. Keeps the rain off them as well and stops them getting frost. But otherwise, a porch. Don't have them in the house on the whole. So I've got a friend who's in an attic apartment, and he wants to have one, and I'm suggesting not. Or at least keep it well away from the fire access. So how much? So I'm suggesting with PV you maybe want to go for a day, so that, and this being Britain, we're not guaranteed solid sunshine for the whole of summer. So sometimes a little bit more, so you can coast through some of the next day as well. Where storage really helps is in the shoulder months, not the summer, not the winter, where you've got some rainy days and some sunny days. So something like a summer day's consumption is a good rule of thumb for PV, battery and PV. But if you want to do what Dan or Alan are doing, you get an off-peak rate, you fill up the thing overnight on cheap electricity, you run your house off it, unless you know it's going to be sunny, in which case you leave it space for the solar to fill it up for you. You can save quite a decent amount of money, and this is what the grid's going to need to do anyway. So you're helping save the planet, in which case you should be covering not a summer's day's consumption, but you should be covering at least a winter's day consumption. If that's including your heat pump, that's going to be a lot more. So for us, summer days consumption is about 5 or 6 kilowatt hours, excluding any heating stuff. Winter, I can't actually remember, maybe 15, so 3 times more for us.